So Crowley, you mentioned Eddie. We should talk about obviously with the England game now 2 weeks away and the general sense. I don't know. I wouldn't think it's universal, but the general suspicion that Prendergast is man in possession of that green 10 jersey. I think what's impressive about both these fellas, by the way, they look to be made of the right stuff mentally. Neither are crumbling here under scrutiny and under pressure and being talked about every week. And this was almost a signature Jack Crowley performance. Like almost a little sprinkling on top was that when Munster were 2 points down at the death, almost inevitably it was Crowley who made that great break up the field. And
I think if they got a penalty at the end, Crowley would have nailed it. I would have put him, but Househam's nailed it. He was in that zone.
The conversion beforehand was great. Yeah,
that was a brilliant kick. I mean, the importance of that kick in the context of the game was that he knew stepping up to that, if he missed it, curtains, they're not going to. But that kick put him back in the hunt, and to me, that's where you see a guy, has the ice in his veins to nail that one because he knows the consequence of it. But I thought overall he had a super game. It's probably his best performance that I can think of for Munster in a long time because he has definitely been a victim of the Munster situation. To be fair to him. And then you have Prendergast who's lighting it up, was kind of stole his jersey in his view in the autumn. But he's back with a vengeance. And this is what it kind of pissed me off when Leinster played Munster in Thomond Park, is that they didn't start him. And I was annoyed for lots of reasons. I was annoyed because I wanted to see him go toe to toe with Prendergast and see how it played out. All the supporters wanted to see it. And it was a chance for Crowley to lay down a marker. If he goes out that night in Limerick and he lights it up and has a bigger game and he maybe plays a better game than Prendergast, he opens up the conversation for the Six Nations. But I think at this point, I think the conversation is still going to be, I think Prendergast is going to get the nod. I'd be shocked if he doesn't. And Crowley is certainly putting pressure on again, is all he can do. But I thought on Saturday he was back with a vengeance, and I'm delighted for him. I'm delighted for Munster. And it's not inconsequential that because he was playing so well, Munster played so well.
Yeah, it's not a coincidence for sure. You're nodding away.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on something actually Eddie said, if Munster had got a penalty at the end. Like when I was watching the game back and I put a clip up on my Twitter, I think Munster had an argument that off the back of Jack Crowley's break, that there wasn't many arms. There was a swinging arm in the tackle that took him down, and I don't think there was a wrap there. And I think another referee could have given a penalty there and Munster win that game. And look, I thought there was an instance in the 76th minute as well, where Pollock, the new English wonder kid, makes an unbelievable tackle on Paddy Patterson in the corner. But to me, it didn't look like he released him. So again, I thought Munster had just reason to believe that they should have had a penalty there, and Pollock gets the match-winning turnover. But so they're just a couple of side points. But I thought overall, look, Jack Crowley was excellent. Since that game in November against Australia, when he came off the bench with Craig Casey and had such a big impact, and that to me, I agree with you, Joe, spoke volumes for the mental strength that he has. Because look, it's no doubt it's been a tough few months, and last Saturday was the first Munster game that I wasn't at live, so I feel like I have a good kind of perspective on watching Jack Crowley over the last kind of couple of months. He was very good against Stade Francais. It was a poor Stade Francais team back in December, if people remember that. They got a bonus point win. He had a tough night in Cast. I was over there at that. Munster were very poor, but Jack Crowley, I think, will be the first to admit himself that he had a poor day as well. They decided to play him rather than, it was between the Ulster and the Leinster game over Christmas. They decided to play him in the Ulster game. We can argue the rights and the wrongs of the system, but that was the choice that Munster had to make. I don't think Munster would have got the bonus point up in Belfast without Jack Crowley. He might not have been at his fluid best, but he was central to their 4 tries that they got. Didn't play against Leinster, and then he's played the back-to-back games here. So I would wholeheartedly agree with Eddie that I think last weekend was by far his best performance in quite some time. I thought he was very good against Saracens last week, but we talked about it with Ian Madigan last week. He had a couple of errors thrown in there, whereas this was much more like it. And again, if Jack Crowley wasn't playing there, I don't think Munster would probably be within an ass's roar of getting with Northampton, because that's how good I think his attack was. It was interesting. Calvin Nash, you mentioned, Joe, I thought he was excellent as well. He's another guy I think was a timely big performance. I know he went off with that head injury, fingers crossed it's nothing serious, but he was very unlucky not to play a single minute in November, having played a key role in his first Six Nations campaign earlier that year. But when he went off injured, it forced Munster to reshuffle their backline. So what you had was Tony Butler came on at 10, Mike Haley went to the wing, and Jack Crowley went to fullback. And actually, when Crowley went to fullback, he still had the same influence on the game. And that break that he made at the end was a beautiful bit of play where Rory Scannell stands in at first receiver. He was obviously playing 12, but he's played loads of 10 in his underage days. He plays it out the back to Tony Butler, who then passes to Jack Crowley at third receiver. So all of a sudden, he now finds himself with a mismatch in midfield and goes through the gap and almost leads to Munster winning the game. So that's something to sort of keep an eye on as well, because I think Crowley's ability to play 15 is seriously handy when it comes to Ireland and picking, if he is going to be on the bench, if he is going to be starting. But having that option of playing him in the backfield is going to really enhance his chances as well.
Yeah, Eddie, I dare say we may not speak to you before the start of the Six Nations at this stage. We'll certainly talk to you during it, I hope. I appreciate you'll tell me, well, I need to see what they're doing in training. So I'm going to unfairly ask you, with just based on match performances, you compare and contrast these two, just with a view to the England game, just winning that game, and the different ingredients both Crowley and Prendergast can bring to the party. If you're the Irish coach, who are you picking and why?
Good question, Joe. I think at the moment, if I'm being fair and open about it, which I'm trying to be, as I think it through, I think Prendergast still edges it, and that's not taken. I mean, I think you've got to reward the guy who's in the form, and I think he's just edged Crowley, and he's consistently good. Like we talked there, and Cian is right, Crowley's had his ups and downs, and I'm delighted from what we saw last Saturday, he's actually turned the corner. And I think he has. I'm not saying him as a one-off. I think he'll double down on it, which is great. But I think Prendergast as well in attack, just that extra little dimension. We talked about this in a previous podcast there in November, where his control of the line that he's attacking with is extraordinary, in that he's able to freeze the defence at the crucial moment, takes an extra half second on the ball. Crowley doesn't have that, and that's, I'm not taking that away from Crowley. I think that's an extraordinary talent that Prendergast has, and then he surrounds that with every aspect of his game. Again, I know it was against Bath, we might talk about it in a minute, Bath were dead and buried, but he made a searing break near the end, but it wasn't the break so much as had this delicious offload halfway to the ground. Which is just like ridiculous. So on a balance, I'd have to say that he's proven himself in the autumn as well. So yeah, I think I'd have to give the nod to Prendergast. But there's a lot less in it than there was a month ago,
right?
And that's a good thing.
Yeah,
that's a good thing
for sure.
The one thing is, I think it's worth mentioning, is that Prendergast is playing with the bulk of the Irish team, and that counts, I think, for a lot. Eddie can correct me if I'm wrong when it comes to selection, because he's playing with the centres, the scrum half, week in, week out. And look, it's also look, I'm not saying Test Rugby playing for Leinster is easy, but Sam Prendergast's job is made easier by the fact that he's playing behind that Leinster pack, which means that for Crowley, who the Munster pack, look, I think we'd all agree it's not anything like the Leinster pack in terms of strength and depth. But so it means that Crowley has to almost work harder to impress, if that makes sense. So I know we're going to get on and talk about the Leinster game, and Sam Prendergast was central to that, Joe.
Well, he was.
Sorry, I just said I'd agree with that. That's a great point. He is getting a bit of an armchair ride in Leinster, and he is playing with the guys around him who will be in the Irish setup. So he has an edge there. And it's fair to recognise that. I agree.
Yeah.